Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of Black Beat Podcast. Hi, I'm John Washington, the CEO and editor-in-chief of Flossin Media, and I'll be your host for today's show, where we, as always, take a apologetically Black approach to profiling people and stories that are significant in advancing the connectivity of our community. Today, we are honored to welcome Senator Lou Frederick to the beat. For more than a decade, the senator has been a significant and influential voice in the Oregon legislation. Growing up in the era of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the senator has remained committed to improving public safety in a real and meaningful and humane way through police reform measures, building economic vitality and security through increasing economic opportunities, and providing relief in times of hardships. Most notably, though, the creation of the Oregon Cares Fund, which provided cash grants to Black individuals, Black-owned businesses, and Black-led nonprofit organizations who have experienced financial adversity due to COVID-19. His most recent legislation and proposals include in Oregon State Bills 618 and 619, which directs the Oregon Department of Revenue to pay individuals who could demonstrate heritage in slavery as an annual annuity. Welcome, Senator Frederick.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you correcting that, because one of the things is it's not an annual amount, it's an annuity, which is a different situation. And unfortunately, one of the reporters who reported it on the national level decided that it was annual, and that headline went across the country, across the world. So it's it's a different thing altogether. But yes, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. That was a very kind introduction. I really appreciate it.
Lou, we love you around here, so we'd like to at least be able to delve into some of the great work that you've been doing up until this time, in light of some of the challenges that our society and our health realities we've been coming under attack in a lot of different ways. But Lou, today I'd like to ask you a few questions. Maybe you can share with our viewers and our listeners. Lou, can you share a little bit with your background? What inspired you to choose the role of public work?
Well, I think it's just a sort of a requirement from where I came from, where my family was from, and what we were involved with. I always talk about the fact that I was tear gas. My first experience with tear gas was when I was 8 years old, and so in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I remember that. You don't forget something like that. But I also grew up in the middle of the civil rights movement. You were correct. I mean, my playmates in elementary school were Marty, Yolanda, and Dexter King. Dr. King was the father of my playmates. And he's the one who told me to quit running through the house. But he also told me, and so did my parents and all the adults around me, said that your job when you grow up doesn't matter what kind of career you have in terms of what you do to make money, but your job as an adult is to make things better for the people who come after you. So that's been sort of a requirement for me, whether I was going to be a molecular biologist or an artist or an actor or a reporter or whatever. I mean, my job was to make things better. So that's what's propelled me to stay and to do whenever I had the opportunity to step in and try to do what I could.
Right on, Lou, and we appreciate that. Hey, Lou, do me a favor. Why don't you share with some of our viewers some of your successes in moving Oregon in a more just, equitable direction, including the work addressing your police reform?
Well, it's really interesting for me because back in 2010, when we had the shooting of Aaron Campbell, if you remember, we had the representatives. I had just gotten appointed to the legislature, and one of the conversations I ended up having with a group of legislators was about what are we going to do about the Portland police, was the line that was used. And I thought to myself, there's an aspect of this that's important. One is people are actually thinking about it, but I don't think they would have brought it up if I had not been in the room. So that's part of it as well. And I began to put together programs or ideas about excessive use of force, discipline issues, how you tracked what was going on, how you recruited people, who did the investigation when there was a case of some form. So began working on bills and introducing those bills in 2011, when my first full session. I continued to introduce those bills and bills like that for the next few sessions, all the sessions actually. What happened though is, as you know, as everyone knows, the murder of George Floyd brought these ideas to the front, to everyone's face, and saying, these issues, these concerns, these stories about Black people being beaten up by the police or treated badly by the police in one form or another were no longer just myths or things that you're just taking it too seriously here. These were things now that were in fact real. And before that, I'd managed to pass bills on dealing with body cameras, the ability for folks to actually film what was going on, because at one time you couldn't do that in Oregon. They could arrest you for that. I also, did a number of other things, and there were sometimes subtle situations where we managed to actually say, no, you need to track who you're pulling over, who you're encountering as a police officer, who you're encountering. Track that in terms of racial disparities. We found, of course, that there were racial disparities, but we started with bills that did that kind of thing, as well as bills that talked about making sure that we started to look at minority teachers and supporting minority teachers, and curriculum, creating curriculum that was clearly designed to talk about the contributions of African Americans and Native Americans and Asian Americans and Latino Americans. But we managed to get a number of bills like that together, as well as some of the economic issues, because it became very clear that a lot of folks that there was money out there. In fact, one of the first bills that I ended up dealing with was the fact that we had money out there by way of the Obama administration, and that was coming into the state, but it was not being given to black businesses at all. So I began to talk about that. Part of it, and part of this is the reason that there's been a change is not just the news, but it's also the fact that when I came into the Oregon legislature, I was the only black person in the Oregon House.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question to you, was to ask you how they receive some of these newly founded changes
well
in the House.
Well, I was the only one in the House, and Jackie Winters was the only black person in the
only other black male, right?
And I used to joke about the fact that when I walked over to see Jackie, that the whole Capitol tilted just a little bit because of that. But the fact is, that's what was going on. Now, that we had in the past, we had a number of black representatives and senators, Avell Gordley, Margaret Carter.
Right.
And Jackie Winters were three of them in the Senate at one time. You also had at one time one of the first black president pro tem was Bill McCoy.
Right.
And you had Jim Hill there, and you had Bob Boyer as well. And you had in the House you had Joanne Hardesty. And also, and a number of other folks. That's how it's gone. But now something has really changed. We now have what we now have a BIPOC caucus, a Black, Indigenous, and People of Color caucus that has 12 people in it.
Wow,
12 people, and three African American men in the Senate. And one was just appointed, Casey Jama, who happens to also be a Somali refugee, but he's now in the Senate, with James Manning, who's from Eugene.
Right.
And then we have nine minority folks in the House, including Janelle Bynum and five Latinx folks there, and a Native American person who happens to be representing my district, Tana Sanchez here, and a Vietnamese young woman we're starting to see a real change. So when you get 12 of us, you get a caucus that's decided that they're going to do something. Things can change. I mean, we put out a thing, and I can get that to you. That's of 10 of the major bills or major areas that we've put bills in to try to make some changes. And because we're sitting on committees, because we're talking with people, or as one person put it to me the other day, a long time ago, actually, said to me, the fact is, if you aren't at the table, you're on the menu. And
yeah, that's some old school information there.
It really is. Well, let me tell you, we are now at the table.
Yes,
we are. And we're making it clear that we're at the table, and we want to see some changes, or demanding some changes. So that's what's going on right now.
Well, right on, Lou, and I appreciate that. And one of the more notable achievements is the creation of the disbursement of the Oregon Cares Fund, which provided financial relief to Black organizations and businesses and Black families suffering from disproportionately, not just from the pandemic, but systemic racism and roadblocks to prosperity. Please share with us, Lou, the successes and challenges you're experiencing, including the lawsuit lodged against the fund. Can you talk a little bit about some of that stuff?
Sure, absolutely. The thing that happened with the COVID pandemic is that it exposed real problems that have been there for quite some time. And we were talking about some of the public safety and law enforcement problems, but it exposed the healthcare issues, the housing issues, the education issues, and the economic issues. If you recall, the initial money that came in from the federal government went out to folks, but a lot of a significantly small number of Black businesses got any of that money. And that was because in many cases, they were not connected to the banks. And part of the way that the money was dispersed was through the banks. You had to have already have a relationship with banks. And so many of those folks were simply not getting that money. And then, of course, we were looking at as everyone has seen, the disproportionate number of people who were getting ill, who were getting sick with the virus, and they were African American. And then, of course, a significant number of African American folks work in the service industry, work in the now essential services industry, and they were also potentially exposed and were being exposed to the virus as well. So it was easy to suddenly say, look, here's what we've been talking about all along. We need to do something about this. And I've got to say, the other thing that was really supportive was the fact that when we said that, we didn't say it just as the Black community saying that. There were 151 organizations and leaders who stepped forward from the Asian Pacific Islander community, the Latinx community, the Native American community, the immigrant and population. All sorts of folks stepped forward and said, this is something you got to do for the Black community. We need to do it for our communities in different ways, but you need to step forward to do that. And so that's what we were able to pass that particular bill out of the emergency board back in, I believe it was June, and say, this is what we need to do. And we were able to do it in a bipartisan fashion, by the way. This was not a Democratic thing. And so we were able to do it. What happened, though, is that, of course, unfortunately, we have folks who want to somehow divide people as much as possible. And some of them decided that that's what they were going to say, that they were left out, and was unfair that they didn't get something like that. We made the point very clear, but they still can file court suits. They filed lawsuits. Some of them were dismissed immediately. They filed another lawsuit. So that one was also dismissed. And then they filed a couple more. And so right now, although we had managed to hand out all but about $8 million of the fund, and we had $62 million to hand out. All but $8 million had been handed out. They froze that $8 million, and people are still where we will be dealing with the whole courts related to that at some point. I don't know when that's scheduled right now.
What made that one last third one began to freeze, what made it different than the other two?
You
What
know,
made the third
I'm
one?
not really sure, quite frankly. It was there were two of them actually. There were two lawsuits filed in that third round. So there both in both cases they managed to somehow freeze it. I couldn't tell you what the language was about it, but it's frozen at this particular point. Not dismissed completely, but we will. I'm sure we'll have more discussion about it here shortly.
Well, tell me a little bit then, Lou, about the reparations. But boy, because I'm gonna tell you, you moving along a track that I was never in 100 years recognizing all of the growth in what you've done and all your involvement in the community. But boy, you have advanced the ball down the field to almost scoring the touchdown. Lou, you talk
Well,
about reparations.
don't see
Come
you
on,
get
tell me a
into
little bit
you
about this
get
reparations bill you got going on next year.
you get into a football analogy so quickly there. I don't know
Yeah,
what to
but
do about
I'm
you.
sorry, but you know me, I'm inside the 20 all my life.
I know, I know. Well,
So,
I think that the key there is this. It is important. This is a time that we can talk about this. We have not really had a time that we can bring this kind of thing up and have people listen. Now, I'm not sure that we're going to get very far. I was going to say that don't expect me to get into the end zone right away here. This is going to be a difficult situation. But I sort of got tired of people telling me that would never talk about it. And I
wow.
said, well, let's have this conversation, because there are actually three bills. One is 618, one 619, and the other one is Senate Senate
SJM4.
yeah Senate whatever. It's a memorial that is really just saying that we agree with the potential for reparations that's come out of in Congress, because there's a bill in Congress, and I believe it's Representative Lee who's the co-sponsor, who's the sponsor on that. But I think it's just time for us to talk about what has actually taken place with African Americans in Oregon, and how that has affected the truly not a news story about it, not a book about it, not a report that somehow someone's put together in an academic digest or something like that, but to really say, look, folks, this is what has been the case for African Americans in the state of Oregon. What do we do about it? How do we actually handle it? And when you start talking about it in terms of, frankly, when you start talking about it in terms of money, people pay attention. If you're talking about it, and we've had resolutions, we have had days dedicated to these issues. But when you start talking about the fact that that the kind of redlining that's taken place has had an impact on the fact that folks cannot have enough money to start a business or to send their kids to college, because they couldn't get loans from the banks, because things had been redlined around their homes, or their homes had been destroyed, even though they might have owned them, because people were able to come in and take over their particular property because of wanting to build a freeway, or to make a coliseum, or to deal with the hospital area. Those kinds of things are when you start showing this, not just talking about it in a committee meeting or something like that, but saying, these folks really deserved some kind of compensation for this kind of activity. What is that going to be? We aren't saying exactly. I mean, the $123,000 annuity is an idea. It's not something that you're going to that is a hard and stone kind of thing. But it is saying this should give you an idea of what we could begin to talk about here. Now, there are folks who want to disrupt that in some way. They want to say, well, how can you prove that someone came from a slave background? And that's actually not that difficult to do. But,
we can trace that very easily.
yeah, but there are people who want to say, well, I'm not sure that I could go back, and well, yeah, you could probably pretty well easily find that out. And so there's that kind of approach that we need to look at as well. But the real key here is, let's talk about this. Let's not just talk about it in some academic environment, but let's talk about it in the real world, because the real world is a situation where people have not been able to put together an economic history or an economic future because of the way that they've been discriminated against in the real world right now here.
Senator Fredericks, I got to tell you, after all the years of watching you in the game, I can tell you this. You are inside the 20 and you got down there and within the 2-minute drill without a problem. We watched you all of this time coming up to this time, and we would always talk about you in the community. This cat's off to a slow start or whatever. But Lou, we got to tell you, after the years of staying in the game and staying on the track, you have gotten this ball to a place to where courage is an understatement here. You are literally in the game of having the conversation. You brought it to a place of the conversation, the actual conversations. Man, much kudos and respect to you, because that is a challenge and a feat that for years, people have been at least just trying to get it to a conversation place. So the courage and being one of the lone elements, now that you got a supportive cast around you down today, but you didn't always have a supportive cast around you. You were a lone ranger in that arena for a long time. So much respect to you. Big kudos, good shout out to you, man, for the work that you're doing down there, and especially in some of these areas in which concern Black people and the families and the communities in which they exist and live in. So Lou, tell us, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, the key thing for me is this. What I'm pleased to see is that we're starting to see the African-American community not really step forward and understand what the system looks like. Not the system that they might have read about or seen on television or something like that, but they're actually stepping forward. I mean, some of the voting that took place in this last election, folks, not just here, but in other parts of the country, that meant that people stepped forward and said, okay, we've got to do something. We can't wait for someone else to do this. We have to step forward to do it. If you look at what's going on and people running for office around the state, we have 3 African-American men right now who are mayors in Albany, in Gresham, and out in the little town of Garibaldi out on the coast. I mean, we have folks who are stepping forward and saying, I think it's time for us to really not accept the idea that someone else is going to make our decisions for us. We're going to step forward. We're going to be at the table. So we're starting to see that, and we're starting to see that especially with some of the young people who are saying, we need to do this. Now, they need to also understand how the system works, because it doesn't work overnight. I mean, right. Somebody said I'm an overnight success. I said, no, that was a long night.
We knew when you stepped on the field the first time. So yeah, it's been a long run, boy, I'll tell you, but Lou, to be honest with you, man, much respect to you, especially this is the heavy lift. And you're in the game and in the time of the heavy lift. And I talk a little bit about these football analogies. Most people don't realize. And when you're playing, and you're running 30 yards down the field, all of that is great and all of that. But the real work is when you're inside the 20, getting ready to go punch it in. And that's when you get your most resistance. And that's when you need your strongest players. And so, and what we've been watching you do has been something short of spectacular. I mean, in terms of these last iteration of things that are going on, that are associated and affecting the Black community today. Now, Lou, tell us a little bit in light of our time and the realization tell us what's next on the horizon. Tell us a little bit about what you forecast, how some of these things are going to go, or tell us a little bit about the work that's ahead of you.
Well, I think you'll see that the racial equity issues are going to be at the top of the list in the legislature because of the way that people have stepped forward. I think the governor has made that clear. All of the caucuses, both Republican and Democrat, have made that clear that they know that this is an issue that they need to deal with, and that they may disagree on how. But it's very clear that's an issue. So I think we're going to see some changes there, and that's going to be changes. It's not going to be changes in terms of just saying that you're talking about racial issues. You're going to be talking about housing. and you're going to be talking about healthcare, and you're going to be talking about education, and you're going to be talking about environmental issues, and they are all going to be related to what we have missed because of this virus, because of this pandemic. It's going to be clearly, people are going to say, well, how does this affect what we do with the school to prison pipeline and all the other things that take place? So that's what I think you're going to see.
Well, Lou, it's important that you put Black businesses in that quiver of yours.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, we will circle back to you on another conversation about Black businesses in Oregon. But hey, Lou, this has been a great opportunity for you to share with our listeners a little bit about the fight that is going on the front line these days. And I really appreciate you taking a minute out of your time to come and talk to our viewers about some of these concerns that they should have of what's affecting the community, the Black community in here in Portland, Oregon. So I thank you again. And this concludes this episode of Black Beat. And Senator Lou Fredericks, has always been a respectful relationship with you, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. And please, thank you, and thank your people for being able to get you here to do this work with us today. And thank you again, huh?
Thanks for the invitation. You take care.
You too, Lou. Much respect to you, huh?
Thank you.
Yes.
Take it away, feeling too good to me. Chilling all day, all in your space is where I wanna be. Here in this room, what did you do? I just can't get enough. Too caught up in your love.